we're going to discuss the fourth and the fifth houses and how to interpret combinations between the two. There are two ways you can get houses to combine. The simple way is by their house lords. So, for example, if you have the fourth lord in the fifth house, or the fifth lord in the fourth house, or a conjunction of the fourth and fifth lords anywhere, or a mutual aspect between them, then you're going to have this dynamic of the fourth and the fifth house working together or combining. The other way to get houses to work together is not by their lords, but by the houses themselves being in a sequence in terms of how prominent they are in the chart. So for example, if the fourth house is the most prominent and the fifth house is the next most prominent, then they're going to be working together or working in sequence. Vice versa, if the fifth is the most important and the fourth is the next, or if they're at the polar ends in terms of what's the most important and least important and best and worst. So this kind of way of figuring out if the houses are working together or not, it's more complex. It's not so easy to just look at a chart and find it. You need to do calculations. If you want to see your sequence of houses for your chart, you can go to my website, vicdecara.com, and add a / and an H, and that will take you right to this report that I have, which will give you a code that looks kind of like this. Now, to discuss the fourth and the fifth house and their combinations, let's start by understanding each house on its own separately. So let's begin by making sure we're clear about what the fourth house represents. The fourth house is the area of sky that is directly below your feet. So this is where the sun is at midnight. It's the midnight sky. It's the underground sky. That's why it signifies the inner self, things which are within or unseen or below the surface. There are three important things to consider when you're thinking about the inner being. The first thing is emotions. The second thing is privacy. And the third thing is the roots, or like where you come from. As for emotion, the fourth house is the house of your emotions, how well they function. So it's the house for happiness, which is the emotion that we're trying to target, and mental health in general. Also, the fourth house is the house for devotion, the expression of emotion in the form of love. Love is the thing we feel towards the thing which makes us happy. And furthermore, amongst relationships, the fourth house represents feminine people, female people, people who feel love a lot, and the mother, the one who's very loving and giving and devoted. Okay, so those are the three main things about the fourth house related to the fact that it has to do with emotion because it's underground or inside us. The second thing is it has to do with privacy. So this is why it's a shy house, or it's a house of shyness, a house of modesty. It's not a boisterous house. It's not an extroverted house. It's the opposite. Also, this is the place where you can be private. So it's your home, your apartment, your room, the place where you can be by yourself and not have other people watching you. And it also pertains not just to your home, but to all the things that are yours and you're privately owned by you. So significant properties as well, besides the home, like cars and things. Also, the fourth house being the underground sky, the midnight sun area of the sky, and being the home where the bedroom is, and being the inner self where things are quiet. It has to do with sleep. And it has to do with peace, tranquility. Now on the third column, so that has to do with two things: our stability, how rooted we are, how stable we are, and our ancestry. That's the fourth house. Now let's take a similar look at the fifth house, because after we understand the two of them, we can talk pretty easily about how they combine. The fifth house, of course, as the number would suggest, is right next to the fourth house. It's on the western border of the fourth. So it's underground just like the fourth, but it's on the western side of it, and the west signifies others. So basically what the fifth house represents is how our emotions move towards others. That basically means love. So the fifth is the house for love. The fourth is also the house for devotion. The difference between the two is the fourth is that sense of love as a feeling of affection, primarily, and the fifth is primarily love as the expression, an expression of love. But these two sides of love are inseparable from it. And so in the house of love, 5, you're going to have both aspects of love as the two spines of everything that it symbolizes. So you have love as a feeling primarily, or love as an action. And then everything about the fifth house fits onto one of those two columns. As for the feeling section, the ability to care about others is empathy. This is the house for empathy, because empathy is feeling what other people feel, caring about how things are for other people. It is also the house of intelligence, because intelligence means understanding other people and understanding other things outside of your own self, outside of your own reflexes, things which take some effort to understand the other people. And so this is the house of intellect, the ability to understand others, and hence, finally, it's the house of communication. On the other side of the fifth house, love is an action. Love as an action will produce things like you make love and have a baby. That basically explains the whole thing about the fifth house. So productivity, fertility, everything comes out of the inspiration of love. And so the fifth house is a very fertile, creative, abundant, productive place. And also it's a very expressive place, because it's love as an expression. So it's basically all the emotions figuring out how to express themselves. This is why it's a very artistic house. It's creative and expressive. And also this is why it has to do with children. Now we understand the fourth house and the fifth house. Let's see what happens if we put them together. The thing that's probably the most obvious, I think, is that the fourth house is the house of love and the fifth house is the house of love. So when the fourth and fifth houses are connected, you have a native that has a lot of love, or they're very loving, or they're very devoted, or they're very orbital of love. Their life orbits love. Another thing about the two is that the fourth is the house of emotion, and the fifth is the house of empathy. Empathy is emotion of others. Our ability to feel the emotion of others. And the fourth is our ability to feel emotion in general. So when the fourth and the fifth house combine, we have a lot of emotional acuity. We have a lot of awareness of emotion. So the people with this combination, they'll be sensitive, sympathetic, empathetic, understanding of others. And they'll tend to be also happy because they're in touch with their emotions. So they value their emotions and they work on their emotions. And also, they tend to be attractive, because people who can relate to us and people who are empathetic with us attract us. Another thing about the fourth and the fifth house is that the fourth is the house of wealth in the sense of home and property, cars, etc. And the fifth is also a house for wealth because it's productive and fertile. It makes a lot of products. So when the fourth and fifth house combine, expect a wealthy person, and in particular, expect a person who produces their own fortune much in the same way that a mother produces her children. They build their own fortune, they're productive, they create goods and services that people want. And then finally, this same dynamic, but in a more literal sense, the fourth is the house for mother, and the fifth is the house for child. So that goes very well together. So this is another sense of how the combination between the fourth and fifth house indicates somebody who's quite fertile, quite productive. They have good children, and they are a good parent. So they are intelligent at advising and guiding people. Now that's what the fourth and fifth house combination looks like in its abstract theoretical form. When you consider it in real charts, you'll get to know the ins and outs of it and see how it works with other things that are in particular charts. So let's do a little bit of that now before we end the video. Let's talk about some real people that have combinations of the fourth and fifth house. You have Bill Gates, Anais Nin, Elizabeth Taylor, Walt Disney, Charles Bukowski, Hermann Hesse, and Jeffrey Dahmer. So Bill Gates has got not only the fourth lord in the fifth house, but also the fifth lord in the fourth house. It's a pretty strong combination of 4th and 5th. And Jeffrey Dahmer is kind of weird because he's a serial killer. So nothing really about 4th and 5th house seemed to indicate serial killer. So let's look in more detail at Bill Gates' chart, Jeffrey Dahmer's chart, and also let's compare them both with Elizabeth Taylor. So first of all, Bill Gates, as you can see, he's got the 4th Lord Venus in the 5th house, Scorpio, and he's got the 5th Lord Mars in the 4th house, Libra. So also he has the 5th Lord in exact aspect to the 1st Lord. This is why Bill Gates is a pretty good example of what the 4th and 5th house combination looks like, in the sense of being intelligent, being able to create goods and services that people actually want, having a sense of what people actually want, having a sense, now I know of course there's all the people that think that he's the devil, but at least if appearances are correct, he's quite concerned with charity and concerned about the welfare of the world and the future of the world and everything. So he's sympathetic, he's empathetic, and he's pretty devotional. The real kicker, however, in terms of how come out of all of the things about 4th and 5th house combinations, out of all of the possibilities, it's the wealth thing, which is the most undeniable and indisputable about Bill Gates. It's because the 4th Lord is also the 11th Lord, the house of profit, and is exactly aspecting the 11th house. That's the key thing. In addition to that, his Mercury has an exact influence on both the 10th house and the 4th house. And Mercury is also mercantile. So this is why Bill Gates is A, a pretty good example overall of 4th and 5th house combinations, and B, in particular, a financial example of how it works. Now, how come he's not as good looking as Elizabeth Taylor? So Elizabeth Taylor's chart, her 4th Lord is the 1st Lord. And it has an exact aspect on the 1st house. So just like Bill Gates' 4th Lord had an exact aspect on the 11th house, her 4th Lord has an exact aspect on the 1st house. So Bill Gates' fortune that could possibly come out of the 4th and 5th combination is directed towards 11th house things, which is primarily money. Whereas Elizabeth Taylor is directed towards 1st house things, which is primarily your physical body. So not only does she have the 4th Lord being the 1st Lord in a trine in the 9th house, exactly aspecting the ascendant, it's also exactly trying to Venus. So Venus is exactly trying to the 1st Lord and to the ascendant. So it's incredibly blessed, the ascendant, which is the physical appearance. Also, what certainly helps a lot, also in Elizabeth Taylor's case, which is different from Bill Gates, her moon is in a water sign and a water navamsha. That makes people beautiful as well. Now, Elizabeth Taylor is also pretty rich, but she's mostly very beautiful. And Bill Gates is also pretty nice, but he's mostly pretty rich. Now, neither of them are serial killers. So let's look at the third chart. Like, what made this person, Jeff Dahmer, very, very evil? So he does have the 5th Lord in the 4th house. But he also has the 6th Lord in the 4th house, debilitated. So he also has debilitated Jupiter as the 6th Lord in the 4th house with the 5th Lord. And by the way, this is exactly the case for Adolf Hitler. It's the 6th Lord Jupiter debilitated in the 4th house. He also has the 1st Lord in the 8th house, which again is an exact mirror for Adolf Hitler. And the real key here is that Saturn and Mars are dominating the chart. And Saturn and Mars are both aspecting the ascendant. And once again, that's exactly the same case as for Adolf Hitler. So I hope that helps you understand astrology really in general, how you have to balance many, many different things and keep many, many things in mind at the same time when you're making any interpretation. I hope it, in particular, the video helped you understand how the 4th and 5th house combinations work, what the 4th house is, what the 5th house is. If you like the video, subscribe to the channel, like the video, give me a comment. I'm doing these in sequence every week, so the next video will be 4th and 6th, which we mentioned with Jeffrey Dahmer. And if you want to know if maybe you have a hidden 4th and 5th house combination that you wouldn't see without the lordships, don't forget to go to my website, vicdecara.com/H. I'll put the link in the description below, and you can order one of those Houses of Life reports. It will analyze all your houses and give you, amongst many other things, it will give you a code as to the sequence of how the houses line up in their prominence. Thank you so much.